the third stage. The fourth stage indicates the opposition or crossing of the cross within the circle. So then we make a vertical line, the fourth stage. So first it was just O with nothing, then second stage, the dot, the first entity, then the horizontal bifurcation, then the vertical bifurcation, the fourth stage. The fourth stage indicates the opposition or crossing of the cross within the circle, the vertical line standing for the spirit force and the horizontal for the physical. Lifting the cross out of the circle, we have it in its simplest form, and since life can add, increase unto itself only by this crossing of spirit and matter, the cross becomes the sign of addition, the plus sign. I just accidentally flipped a page. There's the plus. And then it's multiplication, the x. The fifth stage has the same configuration, but as it were turned 1/8 on its axis. The x within the circle. Just turn it and it becomes x. That's the eighth. Right? No, the fifth stage, I'm sorry, not the eighth. But as it were, it's turned 1/8 on its axis, giving the x within the circle, the x of axis. This is to show that motion has been introduced, that creation has begun. This similarly to the bent candle flame of the yod, the bent candle flame, the solitary candle. I'm trying to do some yachting there, but oh well. It's all Greek to me. Alpha. Indicates that God's impulse, this similarly to the bent candle flame or the yod, indicates that God's impulse has begun to move. Then as the initial motion imparted to the creation not only adds to its working potential, but vastly multiplies it, the x becomes the sign of multiplication. In this final form, the design eventuates in giving us the great symbol of the number 10, x. 10. X is 10. And then if we take the x out of its eternal encirclement in the absolute existence, and by the beginning of the movement this emergence is indicated, and place the two great symbols side by side, we have astonishingly that mystic word and symbol that enters so mysteriously into scriptural allegory, the word ox, which is the alpha, the aleph in Phoenician. The elucidation of the esoteric intimation of this word is reserved for the finale. The extensive list of divine names derived from the Io base may now be scanned. Io is itself the name of one of the goddesses with whom Zeus, king of the gods in the Greek pantheon, entered into an escapade that exoterically sounds less honorable than would be accepted of divine royalty. But as paramour of the supreme God, she would stand in the role of the great mother of life, like Sibyl, Isis, and the rest. An Io character occurs in other mythologies. As, however, the eye functions as the male spiritual symbol and is not to be taken as the vowel force alone, but rather as the consonantal force, it was paired with each of the vowels in turn to represent the conjoined duality. And so we find IA, IE, and IU standing as the base of a number of early deific names. The IA came to serve as the final syllable of all names of countries, as Germania, Britannia, Australia, Russia, Austria, Scandinavia, Asia, India, Arabia, and many more. The IE begins the original Greek name Jesus, Jesus, preceded by the H, denoting again the first motion of the breath of God. It began some Greek words for divinity, principally hieros, sacred, holy, and a priest, from which comes hierophant, hierarchy, and the old Greek name for Jerusalem, Hiroshima. But as IU, it stands as one of the most basic of all divine name forms. IU was in fact the shortest and commonest of Egyptian verbs, and meant to come, because the divine nature was considered an element of consciousness that was in course of its evolutionary coming to deify mankind. The Messiah doctrine connoted the idea of the slow, gradual, and continuous coming of the deific mind to the world. In fact, a common name in Egypt for the messianic character was the Comer. IU is he who comes regularly and continually, periodically. Hence, IU is the primal Egyptian name of deity. As such, it formed the first element of the great compound Egyptian name of the Christ Messiah, Imhotep, which was shortened by the Greeks into Imhotep. In full translation, this would read IU, he who comes. M with Hetep, peace, also 7. He who comes with peace as number 7. This name comprehends in itself another great sermon like the ANKH, the Ankh symbol, referring to the occult fact that in any cycle of creation, the principle of divine consciousness that will unfold to bring peace to the chaotic subconscious elements, the so-called 6 elementary powers, the potencies in the atom, comes to full outward expression in the 7th and last round of the cycle. Christhood is always a seventh unfoldment. Our own word 7 comes from Hetep, as this shortened to Hept, and directly became the Latin septem, by the interchange of H with S, as occurs in very many instances, as in Ashura becoming Ahura. H and S are also closely related through the Hebrew letter Shin, which is either S or Sh in sound. S is really only a sharper H. The next step in the development is quite notable, the I being male spiritual, a consonant masculine gender rather than a vowel, and representing the projected ray of divine mind that beamed forth out of primordial being. ran the course of its projection into the deepest bosom of matter, planted its germinal seed in matter's womb, then turned to return, the configuration of the eye was changed or enlarged to include in its shape the suggestion of the turning upward for the return. It might most significantly then be said that it was turned into the letter J. With more definiteness, the J form could bespeak the masculine divine than the vowel feminine, or the androgynous aspect. Also in this form, it could be more fitly prefixed to the other vowels as J-A, J-E, and J-O, Ja, Ji, Jo, and Ju. With this important change, the number of divine names begins to multiply exceedingly. It is impossible to pass by this item of the turning of the I into the J. The two are essentially the same letter, still in Latin, without calling attention to the astonishing significance of the fact in relation to one of the key words in the biblical allegory of the soul's descent and return. In the Hebrew Mosaic allegory in the Old Testament, the place where God descended in a cloud to meet and commune with his children, Israel, was Mount Sinai. This name, then, must mean the lowest point to which the spirit soul descended to meet matter, the pivot point round which it swings to begin its return to the heavens. This is diagrammed by the lower turn of the J. What must be our astonishment, then, to discover that this key name, Sinai, derives from the Egyptian word Senai, meaning point of returning to return. And where in concrete reality is that point located? Nowhere else than in the physical body of man. The physical body of man is the Mount Sinai of the Bible. And where else could God and man meet than in the body of his human child? An obscure point in scholarship has at last come forth to enlighten us on one of the most important features of our sacred scriptures. Greek mythology gives us Jason, a divine figure. In the Old Testament we have Jacob, Jabez, Jared, Jachin, and perhaps others. James in the New, Jacques